What is going on, everyone? We have the meta snapshot for patch 12.19. This had a lot of changes to the meta because it nerfed a lot of what was strong and buffed a few champions that were a little weak. So starting in the S tier, right now the best comp right now is the Dragon comp. There's a lot of fast nining going on right now, and that is going to be defining the meta quite a bit for this patch. Next up, we have Jade. I'll be honest, I did not expect Jade to jump to the front, but they went all the way from B to S tier with just like a small few changes. Turns out Xiaoyu is outshining a lot of the other carries, and they also have a lot of weird options you can tech in, which is really nice. Xayah is still S tier. Olaf Reroll, they're going to have a little bit of a twist. Right now, they're being played with some whispers, and then Mirage, Daeja, for some reason, even like Daeja 1 is good enough in a lot of cases. So that's going to round out the S tier right now. Moving on into the A tier, we have Guild Zippy, Dragonmancer Lee Sin. Nunu is dead, by the way. And then Darkflight Rengar, this is a new comp. Graves Seraphine, Lagoon, Mage Nomsy, Whispers, and Built Diff, all solid in the A tier. So there's actually a lot of things you could go for right now. In the B tier, Astral's kind of on the cusp. It's like low A, high B tier. It depends on how you use it. Obviously, in the early game, it's great for econing, but the comp as a whole at the end game, probably a little weaker. Darkflight, Cannoneer, and Graves Nilah are still stuck down here, so a lot of the flex comps in this reroll comp of the past, not really stuff you want to be playing right now. And then in the C tier, we have a bunch of the reroll comps that just are not quite viable right now. We also have a new section called Tournament/Pro Meta Shifts, so you guys can check that out in your own time if you are really into the competitive spirit of TFT, because our analyst, Void Sins, analyzes all the different tournaments, including the ones in China, so it's really interesting to see how other regions are playing at the very top level. Let's start off with the S tier. So we're going to go over how to play every single composition as per usual, and starting off with Dragons. So this one, obviously the endgame board, nothing's changed. It's mainly just the way you get there that is the really defining point of this composition. So obviously for Aoshin, you need some sort of mana regen, Shojin, Rageblade, things like that. It also rose up to the top because all the other comps got nerfed a bit. And then you have a couple of tanks in Terra and Idas. You could also play Xiaoyu as well. We go over that in the how to play section down here. And that really depends on how many people are playing ability power compositions. But just keep in mind when you're playing this, don't force this because you can only play it in certain situations. And we list out a lot of the requirements over here, and we get into a little bit more granular detail down here. So let's move on into the next comp, which is the Jade comp. This is one of the newer comps right now, and there are a ton of different variations. So I've seen Gnar reroll, I've seen Xiaoyu solo carry. Some people are still using Jace and things like that. And maybe we just forgot about Jade. Maybe it wasn't that bad at all because the buffs they got were very, very small. So it goes to show just how like very small meta shifts can kind of bring something into the forefront, or maybe it was just being underplayed before. So you typically start with Wukong or Nidalee holding your Xiaoyu items, and then you play Jade with Jax plus Gnar. And then you go into Olaf Warrior Bruisers to push levels, and then you finally put in Soy or Xiaoyu. Some people call him Shrek as well. So they're like 10 different names for this dragon. And yeah, he pretty much just whacks people to death. And really good comp because you can play Soraka while also using our Jade trait. And a lot of teams, they just splash Soraka without using that. So imagine how good she is in an actual Jade comp. She just provides so much more value to your team. And yeah, Soy items are like pretty flexible. He definitely likes sword items the most, and Titan's really good on him because he's able to get a lot of stacks. On to the next build, we have the Xayah Ragewing or Guild Xayah, and this comp is still strong. However, it does get outscaled by a lot of the other compositions, but the good news is that since this is just a 4-cost carry typical comp, it's gonna do pretty well. Obviously, if someone gets a 3-star 3-cost, they should be able to beat a 2-star 4-cost. It doesn't always happen, but that is generally the case in TFT. But you also have to keep in mind how much easier it is to get a 2-star Xayah compared to like a 3-star Olaf. It's pretty standard from before, nevertheless, and your main late game bomb is a Shyvana 2. Going on into the next comp, we have Olaf Scalescorn Whispers. This is a new variation of the Scalescorn comp. Before we were running mages, now we're running Whispers instead. So we have 4 Scalescorn, 2 Warrior, and 2 Whispers. Whispers help a lot because this is a new change that they brought in for this specific comp, is that you can now play dragons with it. So now we can play Siphon, which is also a bruiser and just a pretty good unit in general, and then we can combine that with the Olaf and Pantheon, who are both warriors. The best part about this comp is that they all use super similar items. So Olaf, Pantheon, and Siphon, they all love the attack speed and attack damage items. Yes, I know, there's going to be some variations between them. For example, Olaf really likes stuff like RFC and Runons a bit more than the others, but if you have like healing items like Hand of Justice or Bloodthirster, or even like a Titan's Resolve, all three of them can use it, so you are able to kind of flex the items based on whoever you're hitting during that game. Just make sure when you're playing this composition, you sacrifice your Olaf in the early game so that he gets a lot of his attack damage stacks. A lot of people don't know this, but the more Olaf dies, the more attack damage he gets, so it's really good to stack him in the early game. But yeah, to play this comp, you just reroll for Olaf 3-star at level 7, and then you look for everyone else during that time as well. And sometimes if you're not able to hit him, you have to push level 8 instead. So it's always recognizing with reroll when you should push levels and when you should reroll for your specific carry. Moving on into our next composition, we have the Mirage build. This one's pretty solid overall because Daeja is just a very strong tier 4 dragon, and also everything else got nerfed, so this comp kind of snuck under the radar in terms of changes, and you have a bunch of different builds. Right now we have the Mirage Cavalier build, but there's also the Mirage Guild build that you could use, and it's a great way to go into the Aoshin dragon composition because they share a lot of items such as ability power and sometimes mana regeneration. We go over a bunch of the variations here as per usual, so you can check that out in your free time on my website at bunnymuffins.lol. And now let's move on into the A tier. So, new comp of the week, Darkflight Rengar. Nothing too complicated though. You put Swain in the front, and then you run Rengars with Zeke's Heralds, and it's similar to the Aphelios comp of the past, though it isn't quite as strong as a couple weeks ago when everyone was playing Aphelios. One thing to note is that you do need to high roll a bit with this composition, so you do need to get a bit lucky for it to really shine. And the reason behind that is because you're playing a 3-cost 3-star comp. It's just the nature of those builds because you either hit the 3-star or you don't, and that has huge power implications for your team. So the way to play this is you need either a sacrifice emblem for Darkflight Essence or Zeke's Herald. So what's actually funny about this comp is that you could use like almost any emblem because it all gives the same item, because the Darkflight trait only gives craftable items. But it does help to have the Darkflight emblem so that you have one more of the trait anyways. But the way to play it is you have item holders for Rengar. That's going to be Ezreal, Senna, Wukong, and Nidalee. And having those emblem items are really good because then it makes it so that you don't need a Zeke's Herald, and you could use a sword item on Rengar instead. This comp immediately goes to the S tier if it meets certain conditions, such as getting a Force of Nature or a Darkflight emblem. Lastly, if you ever get the Double Trouble augment, it just makes this comp one of the best in the game, and it's very difficult to compete with. But items for Rengar, Infinity Edge, Assassins always need that, and then some healing from Hand of Justice or BT is good, and then just more attack damage in the form of Deathblade. Just remember to only use 2 items because he could use the extra item from the Darkflight trait. Moving on into the next build, we have Zippy Carry. Obviously, we saw last week that Zippy is actually a thing, and his build right now is going to revolve around just pure damage, some tankiness, and some healing. So Bloodthirster, Titan's Resolve, and Infinity Edge. Keep in mind, if you're playing Zippy in the Xayah, Ragewing, or Guild Xayah build, you want more defensive items on Zippy because he's not your main carry, so you have stuff like Sunfire Cape on him because Xayah's primarily going to be doing most of your damage. But when you're doing the Zippy reroll build, you are going to have to build him up a little more because obviously now he's your main source of damage. So what I like to do with Zippy Carry is run as many guilds as possible because he gets a lot of benefits from the aggregate stats. You could of course still use Xayah as a secondary carry now, but also Hecarim's going to be providing a lot of tankiness and utility with team items such as Morellonomicon and Protector's Vow. You play pretty standard for this composition, so we went over this last week. So you get up to level 7 and then roll for Zippy to stabilize, and then after that you can decide whether you want to reroll Zippy or use it to go into level 9. Next, let's go into the Dragonmancer comp. This is Lee Sin. Nunu is dead, so we're just going to be focusing on Lee Sin now, and he really likes IEJG and then some form of healing items. Some people like Hextech Gunblade, some people like Bloodthirster, some people like Hand of Justice. All 3 of them are good. I would just really stress on the Jeweled Gauntlet plus Infinity Edge combo. Good news is that this comp is really easy to play. You just need Lee Sin 3-star, and you also want to stabilize with Lee Sin 2-star somewhere early on. So that can happen at either 3-2, 3-5, or 4-1, where you kind of roll to stabilize, and that all depends on your HP. So if you have like below 60 on stage 3-2, and you still have a 1-star Lee Sin, and you have a bunch of like other 1-stars as well, maybe you roll there. If you're a bit healthier but have a lot of economy, maybe you could go level 7 on 3-5 and get him there. And if you kind of just have like an average game, maybe you could go for him on stage 4-1. After that, you want to econ back up and slow roll for Lee Sin 3-star. Onto the next build, we have the Graves Seraphine Pantheon comp. This is the same build as last patch, but it has dropped down a lot. You really need to get Seraphine 3-star in order to win a lot of games, as Seraphine 2-star just doesn't really stabilize as hard as it does before. Just to note, it still can be S tier if you have really good augments, and we go over that in the augment section down here, so always keep that in mind whenever you're going through these compositions. Luckily, the core still remains the same. You just need a Morello on Seraphine and then preferably some Zeeks. Seraphine's honestly a really fun unit, and I love the traits that she has, so if you like this comp still, it's still pretty viable, it's just a bit weaker than last time. Next up, we have Lagoon, Soam, and Nilah. This is probably my favorite comps. I'm mainly an ability power player right now, but a lot of the good comps are AD, so I do need to learn those this patch. But I will be coming out with some climbing videos, maybe like 2-hour compilations with a bunch of different compositions for masters, and one of them is definitely going to be a Lagoon only video. So definitely subscribe below if you have not already, if you're interested in that. But I love this comp so much because I really like tier and AP starts, because you could still go both AD and AP with them, and whenever I get like a tier start and I get like an early blue buff, I love stacking Lagoons really early on. I just know how to navigate Lagoons and Astrals right now too, and I just love the econ trades because you just get a lot of free stuff. But of course, there are many other ways to play the game, it's just the way I like to do it right now. It's not even the best way, I just find it really fun. But going back into the build, the only mandatory things are getting early stacks on Soam and getting a Morello on him. Next, you want to spam a bunch of ZZ routes on your front line so you could get a lot of free tanks. And then Nilah, Edge Knight is really good because it allows her to survive a lot of different random attacks, and she finishes off a lot of people that Soam initially damages. So she's really good, she's very important. A lot of people think this is just like a Soam only show, but that's really not the case. Nilah definitely pulls her weight as well. Of course, we have the Lagoon tables. I always like to refer to these whenever I am playing so I know what reward I'm getting next, because it helps you keep interest and things of that nature. On to the next build, we have Mage Nomsy. So I personally have a love-hate relationship with this composition. Whenever there's a Mage Nomsy game, I try to force it, but sometimes I just don't get the right items at the start, and then I get angry at other people forcing it. But overall, it's still a pretty solid comp. So really, the old star of the show was actually Zyra, because she really helped finish off units for Nomsy or CC'd them to delay damage onto your guys. But Nomsy is still pretty good overall. Just AP is really nice on him, and maybe some mana regeneration. You don't really need much more than that. But let's move on into the next build, which is the Whispers build. This is a Zyra Pantheon build. This build's definitely a lot weaker, but it's still playable for top 4s. So we're gonna leave it in like the lowish A tier for now. And the way to play this comp is that you stabilize on 4-1 for Siphon 1 and Zyra 2, and then it plays the same exactly how it did before. Next up, we have Astral Mages. This is another one of my favorite comps as mentioned before. I love Lux reroll. I love reroll in general, so I find it like therapeutic to play. And since you can either play for the reroll style or go to the late game for Aurelion Soul, it gives you a lot of different options. Also, there are a lot of ways to get Mage Spatula, and I really love playing that on Zyra. And Zyra is still good as a CC bot. And the way to play this is that you are going to go for level 6 and reroll for Lux 2-star, or you just use it to fast 9 and play some dragons, so you can play the Astral into the dragon build pretty easily as well. Again, loot tables down here, but let's move on into the next comp, Build Different. Not too much to say here, you just need the Build Different augment. I will say that I only would play Build Different 2 or 3. I would probably avoid Build Different 1, because I just don't really think it's strong enough unless you get some other combinations to complement it. Now onto the B tier, we're just going to do a very brief overview of these because there are too many comps in the A and S tier that I think you guys should be playing, but the Graves Nilah Flex comp, Mortdog talked about this earlier. He's a game developer of TFT, and he said that like a lot of the flex comps of the past were really strong and too strong for the good of the game because it wasn't very beginner friendly. So unfortunately for this set, like, yeah, we probably won't have this in the S tier anytime soon unless they like decide to change their philosophy on that or make a mistake. Darkflight Cannoneer, this is the Aphelios build of the past. I mean, why are you playing this comp when you could play Rengar? It has pretty much the same requirements, except instead of having a non-Darkflight carry in Graves, you get to use Rengar, which is a Darkflight, so it's kind of a no-brainer just to play the Rengar comp instead of the Cannoneer comp, unless you magically get a lot of Aphelios and Graveses really randomly. As for the items, I still think it's the same item start as last patch. Negatron's going to be the worst item, but I think everything else is pretty playable, so just take your pick. It's going to depend on which compositions you really like trying to play. If you like doing flex, I think Belt's the best. If you like doing all the attack damage, attack speed comps like Olaf and Xayah, which are like probably the 2 best comps right now, apart from Dragons, Bow is probably a great start for that. And AP, Tier, and Rod are good. So yeah, that's going to be the summary for that. We also have like a little summary up here for the tourney meta if you want to check that out in your free time. But moving back up to the top, let's just summarize a little bit. Again, like fast 9ing dragons, you could use any comp to go into the dragon comp as long as you have the right items. But as for like standard stuff like Jade, Xayah, Olaf, Daeja, like those are going to be your bread and butter this patch. There are a lot of comps in the S and A tier right now. Normally we just have like 2 or 3 S tier comps and maybe like 4 A tier comps. So they're like a lot up here. Normally most comps are in the B tier or C tier. So far I have pretty good feelings of this patch. We'll see what happens next week. I do update this list every single Friday, so if anything crazy happens or if like a new tech comes out, you guys will obviously be the first to know. But that is going to be it from me today. Don't forget to check this all out on the website as well. And I'll be trying to come out with a bunch of 2-hour compilation videos on climbing to masters with a bunch of different compositions. And then after that one, we'll do all the grandmaster ones, and then we'll keep going up and see what happens there. But thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I hope to see you guys in my next video.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.